I'm going to be working on a new project starting today, and we're going to be using InDesign. InDesign is an Adobe platform that allows you to create layouts for like magazines, books, comic books, brochures, that sort of thing. And it's kind of a mix between Illustrator and Photoshop because it still is pixel based, so it's a raster based program like Photoshop, but it has a lot of the same functions as far as using the tools like Illustrator. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of the basics here so you guys can get started on your next project. So first, make sure you download the program. InDesign has this sort of pink box. You should be able to download it in the same place that you download your Photoshop. When you open it up, it'll bring up this page, and we're going to go ahead and create a new file. And the files here, if you look over to the right side, it's automatically, the default is set as picas. And picas are a unit of measurement that is used in the publishing industry. One pica equals like 0.16 inches, and it's also 12 points. But because it's kind of confusing, it's a lot easier just to switch it over to inches. And we're going to set up a page that's 8.5 by 11. And we're going to use 4 pages. Usually when you're creating books, anything that you're taking a paper and folding it in half, everything's done in multiples of 4. And that's just because if you think about a single piece of paper, if you fold it in half, it has a cover, 2 inside sheets, and then a back cover. So it's automatically going to be 4 pages. If we look through down at the other things we can set up, the columns are just going to be like a guide if you want to, like a newspaper or magazine. You can set the number of columns that you want to have structured there so you can kind of line up your text and your images within that. The column gutter is going to be the size in between, the little space in between the columns, just so that the text isn't just butting up against the next one. The margins, same as just like a Word document, it's just going to be the space between the text and the edge of the paper. And you just want a little bit of a gap aesthetically, and just so that text doesn't potentially get cut off when you're trimming down the paper if it goes a little bit off the edge. The bleed and the slug, we're not going to worry about the slug at all. The slug is really for big companies who are publishing a lot of things. The slug is like a little section, if we go over to this page, that drops down underneath what you're actually printing on, that just contains information about the printing location, the book that's being made, that sort of stuff. So because we're not doing any sort of like really large printing, we're not going to worry about that. But we will look at the bleed. And typically, if you are printing a book with multiple pages, you would want all of the pages to kind of line up and have a smooth edge, so that you have that nice like flat edge that you would see like on a book. And the way that works is all the pages are pressed together and they're put into this like guillotine machine that slices down. And so you want the print to go a little bit over that edge so that there's no chance of cutting one page slightly outside of the line, another one slightly in, to where you might have some little bits of white line kind of showing. So the bleed's usually set pretty small, just 0.125 inches, so it's just going a little bit over the edge so that area can be trimmed off. Just to see what it looks like, you can hit the preview button and you can go back over to see what it's going to look like if I drop this down. So I have 2 columns set, so we're just going to go with this. I'll bring this back up and we'll hit create, and we'll go through some of the basic functions. If you look over here on the right side, it's giving you the layout of the page or of the book that we're making. So this is a single page book, just one piece of paper folded in half. Since each page is 8.5 by 11, our whole sheet would be 11 by 17, which are the large printers that we do have at the school. But when you fold it in half, this top page, this number 1, would be what's on the cover. And then this would be like looking at the inside, opened up, of the 2 pages, this being the fold line, this being the front. The back side of this one over here would be the cover. The back side of this would be the back, which is going to be represented as number 4. For the project that you guys are going to be doing, you're going to be making, recreating an inside spread to any magazine layout that you enjoy or like or come across. If you hear barking, I'm sorry, it's my dog. But we're only going to be focusing on this middle section right here. So I'll open that up, and I can zoom out just to show you that you have access to all of them, but we're just going to be working on this one here right now and kind of playing around with some of the functions that we can do. Up here you have these two different, one says A, master, and the other one says none. The master copy means that anything, any mark that you make, it's going to apply to all pages. So for example, I'm going to come down here and use the rectangle tool. Let's say I want one border that goes around the entire page. So I'll draw this sort of square, and then I can go over here to properties and adjust what that square is. So right now it has no stroke or fill. Obviously, just like Illustrator, if I added a fill, it would just fill it in entirely, but I don't want that. I just kind of want a little border. So I'm going to make the stroke a little bit larger. As you can see, it's kind of growing a bit. I can come up to my selection tool and kind of readjust where that line is, because it looks like I made that maybe a little bit too fat on the sides. So we'll bring it in, and I can also adjust, what that line for that border looks like. If I want it to be, some double thin line or some slanted whatever. I can also adjust what the corners look like. So I'm going to add, a little what they call a fancy corner. So we can go up and see that it kind of adjusts what that corner is. And then we can go back to pages and see, because I was working on the master, it should be then applying to all the pages. So you can see it applies it up here also, and then it applies it down here as well. A few other things that we're going to look through, just basic shapes and building text areas. I'm going to go back and highlight this one because I want to work on only one page at a time. But I'm going to zoom in over here, and let's just draw a shape. So I can either draw, let's say I want some text to go in a block here, in my first column, maybe a little picture that goes down underneath it, and then some more text afterwards. So you can see, as you drag it around, those sort of green lines allow you to line things up as you're creating it. And these shapes right here, I'm going to go and click some text. I'm going to select in there, and I can just fill it up to see what it looks like. Hit a bunch of letters randomly, but that's going to waste a lot of time. There's another trick, so just when you're laying out, before you know what the actual text is going to be, just to lay out what the shape of, the general layout looks like, we can go up here to type, and we're going to go down to fill with placeholder text, and that's just going to fill it up with this completely real looking, it looks kind of like it's old Latin language, but I don't think any of these actually say anything at all. So it's just going to fill in the space automatically. Let's say I want to put a picture down in this one. Let me close this down up here. I'm going to open up and drag an image and place it into the box. Now you can see the image I had was actually a little bit larger than the box that was there, but I can adjust those two, but adjusting them can be a little bit strange because the box that's allowing you to see it and the image itself are not actually connected. So if I click it once and it has this blue border around it, if I change the size, all it's going to be doing is changing that box that it's in originally. So what I want to do is click it twice and get that orange line or that orange box around it, and that's going to be talking about the actual painting or the image that you're putting into it. So I'm going to readjust that one around, kind of make it a little bit smaller and fit it into that shape. So there we go. I could do the same thing down here, add some text into it. Let me go back to the type and fill some placeholder text and fill that up. But we can also do this for perfectly square shapes. So maybe there's some sort of maybe this image is going to be in a circle. Let me do that, and we'll kind of place it around a circle over here on this page. So I'll go over here, I'm just right-clicking, go into the ellipse tool, and let's draw a circle. And again, I'm going to place an image inside of that. I'm going to click it twice. Oh, actually, I need to go up to my selection tool. Click it twice, find the size of the actual image, and shrink that down. And then let's say now I want some sort of text to kind of place around this. So I'm going to use the pen tool to create my shape this time. So this is kind of just like we did in Illustrator. Find those curves from using the handles and setting my anchor points. Oops, didn't like that one. I'm going to undo that. So go back and click it, This is where I'm saying it's kind of like Illustrator, because when you're building out some of these shapes, it's going to be just like it. All right, so I have this new shape. The text can also fit into this in the exact same way. I can drop in my text. I'll go back again to the fill with placeholder, and you'll see that it's filled around this sort of shape. So let's say I have this shape, I have all this text in here, and this is all the text that I need for an actual pamphlet or something that I'm making, but I make the decision that I'd actually rather this shape be a little bit shorter. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit. And then what that does is I can't fit all that text in there anymore, so it had to eliminate some of it. What it did was it added it to this little red square over here. So it's saving that information from the lost text. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create another little box. Let's say underneath that I have the rest of the text I would want it to go down there. I can go and click on that red box and drag it, whoops, not that. Click on the red box and then move it down and drop it into here. And it took all that text that I eliminated when I shrunk that first shape and dropped it down into here. I can do the same thing with images. They can also be put into these kind of odd shapes. So I'm going to go back and just kind of make something that looks weird, shapely thing. And then I can drop an image into there as well. And you can go back just like in Illustrator and adjust where those curves are, what the shape is. If I want to move a specific, this will let me change the entire size of it. I can go and double click on this one area. Actually, that just brought up the picture beneath it. You can move the picture around. I want to move actually just the shape though. So yeah, you can readjust these. I can grab the handles, change it to whatever I want. The rest of the tools are going to be fairly similar, so you should be familiar at this point. These selection tools, both the selection tool and the direct selection, are going to help with adjusting either entire images or specific anchor points. You can drop the text in. Let's say I do want to change up what this text is though, so let me see. I'll go back to all of this over here. I'm going to switch over towards properties with the text, and that's where I have control over what the font is, what size the text is, all that sort of thing. And I can change the color of it, anything that I would want to do that way. There is one other tool that's kind of fun to use when you're laying out, and it's the type on the path tool. And let me actually just draw a path first. So I'm going to go back to my pen tool. Let's say I want something to kind of, the text to move in this weird way around here. So I can use the type on path tool. If I can get that to pull back up. I'm going to make it so that I can see it, just so it makes it a little bit easier, and I can always make that invisible later. And then the font or whatever you write will just follow that line. Again, I can go in and just fill it with placeholder text until I find the actual thing that I want to write. And then if I need to go back later, I can adjust that line to not have any size to it, so it's just the text moving in that shape. You still at this time have all of these different lines that are can be a little bit confusing and distracting as you're setting up your layout to make sure it looks the way you want it to. At any point, you can always go up here to View and go to Overprint View, and that will let you know what it's actually going to look like when you print. If I can, with the exception of the columns are not going to be printing, so this purple lines and this bleed. But so like it looks good. I have all the text in these sort of squares. You don't see the edges of the squares anymore. Let's say I did want to put a border on that. I can always go back. I'm going to jump out of that Overprint View. Go back to this square and maybe add a little bit of a stroke to it of 2. Maybe it's another color, nice light blue one. And go back and see what that looks like. And then now I have a nice little blue border around that text. So I'm going to send this out in another email, but what your guys' project is going to be is to find a magazine spread, so 2 pages that kind of fit together. Just Google magazine spread, or if you have a specific magazine that you enjoy, and I want you to recreate the structure of that. You don't have to keep to the same content of it, so you might find something that the composition of the spread is really cool, but it's I don't know, from a magazine that you're completely uninterested in. You can take your own content and recreate and put sort of the images and the information that you want to put into it, as long as you're recreating the structure of a spread from a magazine that you found online. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, reach out. I'm happy to try and jump on to chat with you and to make sure you guys are understanding this. But we're going to work on this for today's class and next class at least. And this is just going to kind of get you familiar with it, and then we are going to later turn this into you creating a project from the comics that you've been making about what it's like in your specific version of social distancing. I hope you all have fun with this. Let me know if you have any questions.